In CIST 2611, Chapter 7, we'll look at firewall deployment considerations. In this chapter, we are going to describe the fundamental functions performed by firewalls, common firewall technologies, and the elements of firewall implementation and configuration. So the key concepts of this chapter is the firewall deployment security strategies. So we're going to explore various strategies that are employed in deploying firewalls, and those are used to enhance network security. We're also look at the importance of strategic placement and configuration for the optimal protection. Look at authentication, authorization, and counting. So we're going to jump into the framework of the AAA, looking at the important roles of authentication, authorization, and counting in the firewall setups. And we're also going to learn how this contributes to secure access controls and track user activities. Also, the key concept of this chapter is reverse proxy and port forwarding. So we're going to see how these techniques facilitate secure communications and effective handling of network traffic. We'll look at monitoring and logging in firewall deployment, and then how this contributes to the threat detection and prevention. We'll also look at firewall logs and alerts and the roles that they have in notifying administrators about potential security incidents. So some common security strategies for firewall deployments: security through obscurity. So this relies on keeping certain aspects of the firewall configuration hidden to enhance the security. So you conceal specific details to make it more challenging for attackers to identify the vulnerabilities. You also want to implement the principle of least privilege, and this grants users and systems only the minimum access required to perform their functions. So this minimizes potential points of exploitation by restricting unnecessary permissions. So when you embrace simplicity in firewall design and configurations, you reduce the complexity to avoid potential vulnerabilities that can arise from having really complicated setups. You also want to work with the defense in depth. So you want to employ multiple layers of security. These mechanisms are there to provide comprehensive protection. So what this does, this ensures that even if one layer is breached, there's additional layers that remain in place to stop further attacks. You also want to use a diversity of defense where you utilize a variety of different security measures, tools, or technologies. So if you avoid relying solely on one type of defense, this promotes resilience against different types of threats. Also, you want to channel network traffic through specific control points to monitor and filter. So you establish choke points to exert control over the data flow and enhance the security monitoring. You also want to identify and strengthen the weakest link in the security chain. So you focus on fortifying those vulnerabilities that could be exploited by attackers. Another common strategy in firewall deployment is to implement fail-safe mechanisms. And this is done to ensure that the firewall defaults to a secure state in case of a system failure or misconfiguration, and it will minimize the impact of unexpected events on security. Now, the security practice strategy of forced universal participation, this mandates the inclusion of all devices and users in security protocols. What this does is it ensures that every component adheres to security standards, that leaves no weak points in the network. And when we talk about the AAA, the authentication, authorization, and accounting, authentication is going to verify the identity. So it's ensured that each user or the system trying to access the network or resources is who they claim to be. Now this takes place at the firewall, or it may extend beyond it to cover the various network entry points. The authorization occurs after the authentication. So once the user system is authenticated, authorization determines the actions they are allowed to perform. So it specifies what action resources or areas a user or system is permitted to access based on their authenticated identity. This is their privileges. Finally, accounting involves keeping detailed records of activities with the log files. It tracks who did what to which assets. Now, the placement of the network hardware firewalls we're going to discuss. First, you need to understand the structure of your network. What are their natural organizational divisions? So you identify those divisions within your network, considering both natural and the organizational aspects. So this could involve subnets, physical locations, or just departments. You also want to check if these divisions align with those subnets, those geographical locations, or specific organization units. You also want to know the traffic patterns of your network. So you analyze how the data flows within the network, identify common pathways and communication vectors. This includes understanding how different segments will interact. Now you determine those patterns and volumes of data moving between the various parts of the network by performing a traffic analysis. You also want to protect internet access points. So you want to ensure that all points of access to the internet, such as your gateways, are protected by firewalls. So you implement these firewall measures as a safeguard against external threats at the entry points where that network connects to the internet. You also want to protect remote access and wireless connections. So you want to position a firewall between each remote access server and the network access server and the private LAN. You also want to implement measures to secure remote access and the wireless connections because you want to prevent unauthorized entry into that internal network. You also want to analyze potential pathways that either internal or external hackers might exploit to breach your network. So you conduct a thorough assessment to understand where the vulnerabilities exist and how the hackers might exploit them. Finally, you want to evaluate your entire IT infrastructure for any unique aspects or features that may require a specific firewall protection. You may adapt a holistic approach to security, addressing any distinctive elements within your environment that may pose a risk as well. Now, a reverse proxy server, this serves as a firewall service facilitating external user access to internally hosted web resources. So the key benefits of using a reverse proxy is it does enhance security. So no external user, they do not have direct access to internal web servers from the public network. So this provides an additional layer of security. The proxy server can also act as the encryption endpoint. This enables packet inspection of traffic destined for the web server. So this enhances security by using the encrypted communication and ensuring that it is secure. Also, utilizing reverse caching on the proxy server results in enhanced performance. So the web pages are cached. That reduces the load on the internal web servers and improves the response time. Now, port forwarding, this is a versatile firewall proxy and routing services with specific functions. They receive the resource request on one of the port interfaces and it redirects it to another address on either the same or a different port. So this enables flexible resource management within the network. It's considered a variation or enhancement of NAT. It's going to sometimes be referred to as the port address translation. Once again, this allows the effective handling of resource requests. Now, there are some limitations of port forwarding. You have no caching, so it does not support the caching of resources. It does not serve as an encryption endpoint for secure communication. The port forwarding lacks load balancing capabilities, and only a single internal machine can use a forwarded port at a time. Now, these port forwarding services are commonly found in various devices supporting NAT, including firewalls that are hardware and software, wireless access points, and internet connection devices. Now, while it does have its limitations, the port forwarding does play an important role in managing resource requests from a network. Now, Bastion host is an important component designed to defend a network's front line. So when you select the operating system for a Bastion host, there are several considerations that come into play. A system purpose built for the first line of defense of the network, the initial host accessed by the external entities en route to the DMZ, extranet or private network resources. So it absorbs the brunt of any attack, protecting the host behind it. Now, there are a couple of different categories of Bastion host. You have proprietary proprietary OS. These are specifically crafted to function as Bastion host, and there's something that's going to be commonly used in appliance firewalls. You also have your general purpose OS like your Windows, Linux, Mac OS, Unix, and others. These can be configured to serve as a Bastion host. They must be hardened and locked down to increase their security measures. So when we talk about monitoring and logging, these firewall logs and these alerts, they're going to serve as an important tool for monitoring and responding to the events. So we'll look at some of these. So when we talk about monitoring, that's observing and recording events and traffic that are occurring or passing through the firewall. Now, the purpose of logging is the validation of firewall rules. It ensures that the configured firewall rules are functioning correctly. It also provides a historical tracking and trend analysis. So we have that historical record for analyzing trends and patterns of the traffic. And it's also reactive tracking of attacks. So it enables the tracing and analysis of attacks after they occur. So the data that we should use to be logged include all connection rejections. So you want that recorded where those connections were denied. You also want to log the successful traffic that went through the firewall. You want your firewall configuration changes, so any modification made to that firewall's configuration needs to be logged. And also, any access to the firewall system itself needs to be logged. Now, once again, the monitoring, this allows for alerting. So it's there to allow you to enable a prompt response to any potential security incidents. Now, alerts are automated notifications triggered by specific events affecting the firewall. So some common events that warrant alerts include a firewall reboot. You have notifications for any attempts to establish connection with the firewall host. You also have alerts based on communications to and from a predefined IP address or subnet. You also can be alerted on detecting some or all types of attack attempts. You also have immediate alerts when a security breach or successful intrusion has been detected. So these firewall alerts, they're a proactive measures. And what they do is they ensure that timely awareness of critical events and enables swift responses to those potential security threats. Now, when you look to examine and interpret firewall logs, there are a couple key steps that you may look at these. You want to identify and discard packets involved in the benign sessions between valid hosts and ports. You will identify and discard valid user data protocols, transmissions to and from authorized hosts and ports. You also identify and discard valid internet control message protocols and other authorized protocols to and from legitimate hosts. You identify any communications that are originating from known malicious addresses and then take those appropriate actions as needed. Also, identify any communication from unauthorized or unassigned internal addresses. And then finally, you identify any communications directed to an unknown or unauthorized port of an internal host. You will also identify patterns of serial communication attempts across a sequential or randomized set of addresses and or ports. This may indicate a scanning or probing activity. You also need to identify significant volumes of non-session traffic with the same or similar construction targeting one or a small group of internal addresses. So this may suggest a potential threat. Also, when you're looking at the logs, you may identify any packets with invalid size or invalid header construction, as these anomalies may indicate a malicious intent. You identify packets configured with source routing. This could be an attempt to manipulate the packet's path. Finally, you identify packets destined for non-resource sharing systems, such as your firewalls or routers. This may signify suspicious behavior. The intrusion detection system and intrusion prevention system, these are system monitors, the internal hosts or networks watching for symptoms of compromise or intrusion. So the intrusion detection system, it monitors, it's a companion to the firewall. It detects when the attack is occurring within the network and reacts to the threat. The intrusion prevention system detects attempts to attack or intrusions before they are successful. And these are often used as an initial layer of a proactive defense. So a signature-based detection, this relies on a predefined signature or patterns of known threats. So it compares the network traffic or system activities against a database of signatures to identify those matches. The database detection uses a database of known vulnerabilities or attack methods to identify and block potential threats. Now, what this does, it targets specific weaknesses that are categorized in the database. Knowledge-based detection, this leverages expert knowledge to identify abnormal and suspicious behavior. So it combines human expertise with predefined rules to detect deviations from expected patterns. The anomaly-based detection, it establishes a baseline for normal behavior, and it's going to flag any deviations as potential threats. So it detects the unusual patterns or activities, and those maybe indicate a security incident. Finally, the behavioral-based detection analyzes the behavior of users, the systems, and network entities to identify any anomalies. So it focuses on the deviation of expected behavior, and it looks for signs of compromise. So all of these different methods, they work together or can be used individually to enhance the effectiveness of our IDSs or IPSs in identifying and preventing security threats. So now we're going to talk about the security event and information management, the key components of this. Now, Security information management. Um, security information management integrates security event management and security information management. So this is a combination of the two. A couple of things that it does is it has the deduplication, so it processes of eliminating or silencing duplicate events from multiple devices. So it ensures that the redundant or identical entities do not clutter the analysis, enhancing the efficiency of the system. It also collects a log information for systems across the network. It gathers that data from various sources to provide a centralized view. So you have a comprehensive security monitoring. It also identifies how events captured in the log are related using statistical measures. So it establishes a connection between the different events to provide context and uncover patterns that indicate that are um, indicative of security threats. Now, the time synchronization, this manages disparities between the system clocks across various devices. So it ensures accurate and synchronized timestamps of events. And that helps in aiding in chronological analysis. The in-band management is the most common method used in the SIM. So it involves using common protocols to collect information about the network. It allows for real-time monitoring and management of security events. The out-of-band management involves a device, commonly a server, that's having access to specific devices controlled through a management port. So it provides an alternative method for managing security events and information. So when you evaluate your needs and solutions into designing security, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. The business essential is critical security that's needed is directly tied to the core business operations. This would be like protection of sensitive data, intellectual property, uh, systems that are vital to the business. Business wanted is security measures that enhance business operations. These could include additional features or safeguards that contribute to the business satisfaction, customer satisfaction. Personnel is security requirements driven by individual users or employees. And finally, malicious is security considerations aimed at preventing or mitigating malicious activities. So this addresses potential threats such as cyber attacks, malware, and so forth. So what happens when the security gets in the way of doing business? You have to find that fine balance. So when this happens, the security measures obstruct business operations. Organizations face decisions on how to proceed. So some short-term options and long-term solutions are available. Short-term options is disabling security. So you typically bypass security measures to facilitate urgent business tasks. Now this does carry the inherent risk and should be approached cautiously. You can also avoid block tasks. So you choose not to perform those tasks that are currently hindered by security measures. Now, this may lead to operational gaps, but it does ensure adherence to the security policies. Now, the long-term solutions is maybe to reevaluate business tasks. So you analyze business processes in the context of the existing security infrastructure. And when you do this, you're going to identify the tasks that are consistently clashing with those security measures. And from there, you design a new security solution or modify how a task is accomplished. You do this to better align with your operational needs. So in this chapter, we've talked about firewall deployment security strategies. So we've looked at strategies like defense in depth, least privilege, diversity of defense, deploy security through obscurity. uh, and also understanding potential vulnerabilities. We discussed the AAA, the authentication, authorization, and accounting. Authentication verifies identity. Authorization determines the actions, and accounting tracks those activities. We discussed reverse proxy and port forwarding. Uh, so we can leverage that reverse proxy to secure access for internal web resources. We can utilize port forwarding to redirect resource requests to the designated ports, and that will enhance security. We've also just talked about monitoring and logging and covered in this chapter. We want to establish comprehensive testing plans before installation for validation. You also want to regularly monitor and log events for historical tracking, trend analysis, and reactive response. Finally, we've talked about firewalls and logs and how logs are essential. You want to log essential data like connections, rejections, and configuration changes, and access to the firewall. You want to set up alerts for critical events so that you can have a prompt response to any potential threats. And putting all this together, this is, by understanding this and implementing these concepts, this is something that's going to be crucial for maintaining a secure and efficient network environment.